What happened to Choujin X? This is a series by the creator of Tokyo Ghoul, but nobody really talks about it. It's been out for a few years now, but there's no sign of an anime announcement, and the manga sales aren't that great. At the same time, everyone I know has been telling me to read this manga for 3 years. It's just one of those manga that hasn't really blown up yet, but you always see people talking about it. So if you're like I was, you're probably wondering what Choujin X is even about, and whether it's really just a waste of time. That's why in this video, I'm going to share my first impression of Choujin X, discuss why it's not as popular as Tokyo Ghoul or other manga, but also explain why it's an amazing action thriller with some of the best art from any ongoing manga. Just be warned that there may be some spoilers. So first let's talk about what this is even about, because people were telling me to read it all the time for about 3 years, but I had no idea what it was really about. I just knew it had a bunch of creepy monsters. Well, actually, even that was kind of wrong. So let's start there. Choujin X is a story about Tokyo. Tokyo is a high school student who works as a vigilante with his best friend Azuma. And I know that sounds pretty weird for high school students, but it makes sense when you find out that this world isn't quite like ours. It kind of takes place in our world, but there aren't any states or big countries. It also takes place about 30 years in the past, which I found out when the characters were all using flip phones. Anyway, the reason there's no nations or government is because of the rise of Choujins, which are basically mutants. And I use the word mutant deliberately because if I were to compare this series to anything else, the one series I'm always thinking of is X-Men. In X-Men, it's a big deal if you're a mutant because you get discriminated against. And then when you go to join the X-Men, it's like one big crime-fighting family. On a very basic level, that is essentially the story of Choujin X. The rise of Choujin means anyone with superpowers can do whatever they want. In fact, Choujin have actually gone to war and led massive armies, which is why the infrastructure is so poor, and the Choujin kind of govern themselves. So when Tokyo and his friends gain Choujin powers, they end up in Yamato Mori, the Choujin X version of the X-Men. You know, it just dawned on me as I'm recording this video that maybe the X is a reference to the X-Men. I don't know how true that might be, I just think it's a cool idea. But to get back to what I was saying before, to say Choujin X has creepy monsters isn't quite right. I mean, you look at any of the spreads of this manga and yeah, there's creepy looking characters. But the only creepy thing about Choujin X is the art style. With the exception of some of the villains, most of the characters are pretty chill. This is partly why Choujin X feels more like the X-Men. The X-Men stories can get really dark, but it's not a dark story. It has its serious moments, but it's really just about the action and the cool characters. And the same is true for Choujin X. It's easy to try and sell Choujin X as this high-level, intellectual, pretentious manga, and that's just not true. It has plenty of layers and it's got some really dark moments, but it's not a psychological thriller. In fact, Choujin X is just as goofy as anything from Shonen Jump. It just adds in plenty of serious stuff too. Admittedly, I have not had the chance to read Tokyo Ghoul yet, but I'm guessing Choujin X is slightly less dark, which may explain why it hasn't had nearly as big of an impact. But before I explain that, make sure to join the channel if you're enjoying the video so far. You'll get custom badges and emojis to use in weekly live streams, and you can pick which series I cover next. Now, as much as I love Choujin X, I have to admit this is very much a backlog series. And by that I mean there's only 2 chapters a month, and outside of Japan this series does not have a big fan base. And just to get a better idea of what I'm talking about, let's compare it to Tokyo Ghoul. Tokyo Ghoul came out in 2011 and was published in Weekly Young Jump. Obviously, that's a series that people still talk about, and it was popular enough to get an anime, even if the anime turned out to be kind of a mess. But the manga ran for 3 years and it's got something like 50 million copies in circulation. Meanwhile, Choujin X has been running for 4 years and isn't nearly as popular. It debuted in the same magazine but has had maybe 2 million copies, and there's no sign of an anime announcement. So on the surface, it seems like Tokyo Ghoul is just a better series. But there's a couple of important differences. Tokyo Ghoul was actually printed in Weekly Young Jump. Choujin X started in the magazine, but after a short time, they took it out of the magazine. So now it's really only published on their website and on Manga Plus. So part of why Choujin X probably doesn't get pushed as much is because it's not in the magazine anymore, and it's not on a weekly schedule. The reason this is so important is because if a story is coming out every week, it's that much more relevant, meaning people are more inclined to buy the manga. If you only publish new chapters every 2 weeks, that means you're doing way less volumes in a year. By definition, you are doing less volume than a weekly series, hence why you have less sales. That being said, Tokyo Ghoul was only 3 years old and it got an anime. Choujin X is 4 years old now, and there aren't even any rumors of an anime. I've seen one rumor that Ishida is talking to the scriptwriter for Tokyo Ghoul, but I can't find a source to back that up. Which is a shame because Choujin X has like 100 chapters at this point. It's technically on chapter 60 or something, but there are a lot of chapters like 60.1 and 60.2. So it's really over 100 chapters long, which is typically when you either get an anime or it never happens. Which brings us to the real question of whether Choujin X is worth following. Because it's been 4 years, it's got a small fan base, and there's no sign of it getting an anime soon. So there's really no urgent reason to catch up to the manga. That being said, I can confidently recommend Choujin X as one of my favorite ongoing manga. It's got fun characters, great fights, and some of the best art from any ongoing series. So if you don't care about the series blowing up and just want a really good manga, then you should definitely be reading Choujin X, especially because it's so much like other great series like the X-Men. Now, part of why I say that is obviously because of the superpowers. The powers define the characters in the world much like they do in X-Men. At the same time, Choujin X is a nuanced power system that isn't just a big mess of crazy powers. First of all, there's different ways to become a Choujin. Some people get it genetically. Some people can take a drug that mutates them. Some people even get powers from other Choujin against their will. And there's even Choujin that can steal powers. There's also different types of Choujin. Some Choujin have creation powers that let them make different stuff. Some Choujin, like Tokyo, have beast powers that let them transform to gain the abilities of certain animals. And then there's the really weird Choujin that I'll just let you find out about on your own. Clearly, Choujin X is a bit like JoJo or Hunter x Hunter, because there's a bunch of different powers, but there is a clear power system that gives the story some structure. In that sense, Choujin X is obviously a bit different from the X-Men. But like I mentioned before, where it feels more like the X-Men is in the cast. Choujin X starts out with a bunch of different characters, but they soon become a close family. Obviously, there's Tokyo and his friend Azuma. Soon they meet Ellie, a girl from the countryside that fights like a bandit. She seems like kind of a ninja, but really all she wants is to run her grandpa's farm, get rich, and marry a bodybuilder. You also have some of the veteran members of the group like Momoma, Simon, Michael, and my personal favorite, Michelangelo. Michelangelo doesn't have a tragic backstory, and he's really not even a complex character. He's just a cute little bug man that talks to bugs. And that's exactly why I love him. He's one of many different characters that round out the cast as a whole. Obviously, there's more important characters like Tokyo, but even characters like Mike leave an impact because they're fun and they add to the character chemistry in a meaningful way. I should also add that there's a zombie girl named Palma, which I love zombie girls, so obviously she was instantly one of my favorites. Needless to say, Choujin X has an incredible cast of characters. It's got its main crew that drives the plot with plenty of emotional moments, and it's also got a great cast of side characters that round out the team and make the cast as a whole feel so much fun. The villains are incredible as well, but I'd rather you find out about them on your own. Now, one thing you've probably noticed by now is how great the art is in Choujin X. Obviously, it's the first thing that stands out. It's got a bunch of crazy looking characters and the art style is incredibly detailed. In that sense, it seems a lot like Tokyo Ghoul. And this is probably a big reason why Choujin X isn't in the magazine anymore. This manga is insanely detailed, so it makes sense why it only comes out twice a month. Part of it is the detail in the character designs and the action, but something I don't really see anyone talk about nearly enough is the paneling. I actually did a video on this earlier this month, but good paneling is criminally underappreciated. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say Ishida has some of the best paneling I've ever seen. In fact, I might even argue that it's better than some of the stuff in Chainsaw Man. A bit of a hot take, but that's just how good it is. Which is exactly why I cannot recommend Choujin X enough. The art is insanely good, the found family is a lot like the X-Men, the character writing is awesome, the power system is really fun, and above all else, I have to commend Ishida for writing a story that perfectly balances creepy styling and chill vibes at the same time. It's a great action thriller with tons of emotional moments, but it's also a manga that isn't afraid to have fun. Unfortunately, we probably won't be getting a new anime anytime soon, and there is the fact that the chapters only come out twice a month. But now that I'm finally caught up, I can wholeheartedly recommend Choujin X as one of my top ongoing manga. But maybe I'm wrong. How would you rate Choujin X? How does it compare to other manga? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And don't forget to become a channel member. You'll get custom badges and emojis, you can pick which series I cover next, and you can even get credited in future videos. Also check out my other recommendations, which you can find in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.